Howdy. This is where I would normally go, hey, here's the rules, woohoo, but since this is the final part of a video series that has had basically the same exact rules segment every video, we're not going to this time. We're going to go ahead and get straight to the point on why this video has so many goddamn chapters. For the last BTD6 video, for the time being, I decided to extend this challenge, by a lot, including every beginner and intermediate map. I wasn't originally intending for this to be the route I went, but after spending a combined 60 fucking hours on these 3 maps in particular, I decided, I'll consider this a fair trade. For that reason, you're not going to be seeing these 3 maps in particular. To be blunt, these 2 are because of time, because basically everybody wants this video to come out and I honestly don't feel like spending another 15 years trying to beat them. And for Mesa, I honestly thought this map was impossible, or close to without Inhuman Micro, until this fucking specimen managed to beat the map with a newly legalized MAD. I'd like to say myself and the community as a whole have spent about 125 or so hours on this challenge, so this is genuinely a big accomplishment. And although obviously it won't be a direct shout out in the video because it'll be published, if you have a way to prove that you beat these 2 maps in particular, I will edit the description and credit the first person to beat these 2 maps. Lastly, there will be a sponsor at the end of this video. If you want to stick around for that, cool. If you don't want to, cool. Just glad to see that you're here. Anyways, let's begin our adventure, starting with Monkey Meadow. To be painfully abrupt, we're going to actually be condensing a lot of the beginner maps down immensely for obvious reasons. The limitations aren't drastic enough to make some of these maps brutalizing, to say the least, and on some of them, unless I completely fuck up a strategy or timing on a monumental unseen level, I'm probably gonna be okay. I found that another challenge I added onto this is to also black border every map and to use every available tier 5. Except for Homeland Defense. In retrospect, I didn't get to this one, and I honestly don't know why. It's a lot fucking better than Trade Empire, I'll tell you that much. Anyways, the first 2 maps used basically the same strategy. Primary expertise alongside a few tier 5 primary towers. MOAB Eliminator, Super Maelstrom, Tack Zone, Crossbow Master. You get the point. Primary towers go burr. Town Center. Town Center was a pretty basic start, being a bit more on the cautious side to save up for my guy Churchill, and once I got him it dealt with the next few rounds well enough to start up my Shinobi tactic spam. I know what you're all thinking when I say this. Davey, where's I have no mouth and I must scream? Don't you worry, I made an aesthetic ass background for when I find the time to read it and it will be a video soon. I'm very contrarian. Spend literal dozens upon dozens of hours to fucking find out every Pokédex war criminal and editing it in full to be borderline a documentary? Yeah, sounds good. Reading a fucking book and not even editing a video at all? What the fuck do you think I am, a goddamn content maker machine? You gotta respect my field cabin. Although this map is on a higher echelon of beginner map difficulty, it's one that ultimately is still open for quote, meta strategies. Who even needs alchemists anyways? Anyways, with a basic destroyer start with Quincy and a few other towers for support, that was more than enough to get me to my flagship carrier. And by then, all I had to do was get my permaspike up and running with an MIB to deal with the early 90s, then finish everything off the Sky Shredder for the last few rounds. And then it was time for Resort. With Resort beaten, it was time for Skates. Anyways, here's God. You may have remembered this classic comic antic from the last BTD6 video. Look, Ninja Kiwi, I love you, I love your game, and I'm willing to overlook every fucking war criminal you've ever released or will ever release if you just buff Comanche Commander next patch, okay? Okay. And guess what, boys, they did it. Granted, isn't it an immense buff? Not exactly, but god damn it, it's something for my Comanche, and I can say with relatively no confidence that the Comanche is at least slightly decent now. Although with his buff I do have to be honest, the Comanche Commander is oddly one of the best late game options we have for this challenge. And no, I'm not in denial, I'm actually being serious. It's no Apache Prime, but since its biggest nerf was its interactions with the top path Alchemist, which isn't even available in this challenge, it's honestly not bad. Anyways, with our newfound Overlord, I could save up enough to get another tier 5 off of my arbitrary checkbook. The Mad. I thought buying this would pretty much just be an automatic win, but it actually required a small amount of micro because of the ceramics. I had to also buy a bunch of spike factories and came pretty close to buying an illegal one on accident, but eventually we beat that and moved on to Lotus Island, in which I went for the interesting strategy of copy and pasting the cabin strategy, but with Soda instead of Quincy. Woohoo, Candy Falls. For this I went for the Apache Dart ship because I accidentally upgraded the top path 3 times instead of the bottom path, and although this is sacrilege on a damning level, Apache Dart ship is an extremely good stepping stone, so I decided to run for it and get my 6 Sith build up and running. But since lightning is outlawed, I guess we're going for the Disney Star Wars route. That joke honestly doesn't even really make sense, but neither does riding horses on a fucking flat spaceship that has the capability of turning left or right at least 10 degrees, so I guess we're 1 for 1. Anyways, obviously an Avatar of Wrath is an Avatar of Wrath, and with Edian I got a bottom path glue capable of helping against the DDT waves, and then a blue Sabo for a little bit of additional support, worst case scenario, and we're able to beat Willy Wonka's Balloon Adventure and move on to Winter Park. If you see this and think to yourself, hey, I've seen this episode before, you're not necessarily wrong, except there's a ninja, a glue monkey, and a Korean stabby lady rotating at excessive speed, so I'll consider this a prequel to the Monkeypocalypse. Since 230 MLB Maulers, and for that fact 031 MLB Maulers are available, turns out primary expertise spam is a little bit good. Granted, no Striker Jones, but It usually just results in an automatic win unless you're really scraping by to get it, so yeah, carved. We got planes. Originally there was only going to be 1 planes here, excluding Edians, but it was evident that getting the Bloon exclusion zone wasn't going to be a possibility here, so instead we got the Himmelschredder. And no, I don't care if the game's language is not on German, Himmelschredder sounds way cooler than Sky Shredder, and with the Golden Armada's Wrath we're able to beat Carved and move on to Park Path, using Sada and Flagship Carrier as a really only defense for most of the game. I was able to finally save up to my Bloon exclusion zone, and as the name and description implied, Bloons were excluded from existence. Honestly, one of the more metal upgrade descriptions. I mean, it's no Glaive Dominus, but honestly, I don't think anything as of current beats Glaive Dominus in sheer fucking violence other than, you know, the Dart Monkey Paragon. I honestly can't wait until the Airplane Paragon comes in and its description is just, this is the biggest plane, with like fucking 15 exclamation points. I think that'll be cool. Ninja Kiwi, feel free to hire me. Alpine Run. This was yet another map I knew I needed to knock off an arbitrary tier 5 for my arbitrary quest to arbitrarily use every arbitrary tier 5. Anyways, here's Bloon Crush. Using Churchill and God as a stepping stone I was able to get it, and well, it's a Bloon Crush. It'll pretty much kill everything it sees, it's just a matter of how much goddamn time it's gonna take. I mean, eventually there's just a point in which I decided a better use of time was turning my desktop into a goddamn rave. And was that the best use of time? Probably not, but look. Time is ever marching towards our inevitable death. And I don't care what type of afterlife there could potentially be. I don't care if I'm going to heaven, Valhalla, Hades. All I know is that while I'm a human person in the realm of the living on Earth, that I want to make a shitty desktop rave with bug. And I think that's admirable in its own way. And I think you too should strive to do better things in your life. But don't stop where I stopped. You can do a whole lot better than making a desktop rave. Look, I believe in you. Your hopes, your aspirations, your dreams, go ahead and fucking grab them, dude. They're yours to take. Is this completely uncharacteristic of me to say? Absolutely. But I don't fucking care, I believe in you. Here's Shinobi Tactics again. Problem though, me being the certified dumbass that I am, I actually didn't have enough money to buy the Grandmaster Ninja. Which is kind of important, and I have to wonder if it's because there's 4 fucking villages and one of them isn't even doing anything.
What the hell is this?
Despite my city planning and governing rivaling only Detroit in sheer dumbassery, I was still able to beat this map with the occasional Sada ability and stalling support. And after this, we're able to move on to In the Loop. I don't know about you, but I'm sure as fuck getting tired by these beginner maps, and I'm not even the one watching this. So instead, let's do a lightning round for these last few. Special Poperations gave me an entire 0 lives and $0. But you know what? I got a marine out of it. That's something. Honestly, just seeing all the helicopters do this Dragon Ball fusion shit was kind of a reward all on its own, so I'm okay with this not being a particularly, meta strategy. Cubism was Cubism, Preemptive Strike and T-Bow, as well as an elite defender, for reasons I'm sure. Fia Krysa was Pat Zone, Primary Expertise, and Permaspike. Hedge was Ultra Jug, Permaspike, and God. End of the Road was Cripple, MLAB, Carrier Flagship, and Sky Shredder. You can guarantee your silly little ass that I had to call him the big gun for logs. That's right, baby, it's the Trade Empire. Only the best chimps monkey in the entire game. It trades, and it's an empire. Do you think these dumbass monkeys have an empire? Maybe this one, but the rest of them, fuck no, I don't think so. Trade Empire wins again. Anyways, here's the intermediate maps, starting with Bloonarius Prime. Since these maps are harder than the beginner maps, at least most of the time, I'll be going a little bit more in depth now. For this, I went for a pretty basic Quincy and Dart Monkey start with a Sniper Monkey to help deal with early camo and lead rounds, and then eventually I got a Helicopter and a Mortar Monkey. Although you're going to see the middle path Mortar Monkey a lot in the later stages of this video, for this one we actually went for the biggest one instead. Although before that I actually had to buy a Comanche Defense to help me save enough to get there. And that did fantastically. So fantastically actually that I said, the biggest one? More like the stupidest one. We got the Comanche Commander. God then cleared everything until we got our Explodey Boy, which with the MIB and a small amount of micro got us to the end game, and with some slowing and stalling towers I was able to buy a first strike and beat Bloonarius Prime. Now it's time for balance. That was a close one. Encrypted was a bit more difficult. I got my Dart Monkey set up and got my Edian and Tack Shooter in the middle, and although I think Blade Maelstrom would have been a bit better for the late game, Tag Zone was still a great tower to deal with the mid-game rounds until I got my biggest one. With this combo I was able to save up over $50,000, in which I bought my MIB and a Monkey Heli that I then upgraded to, you guessed it, a Comanche Commander. With the occasional Edian ability, this was more than enough to beat round 100 and move on to Bazaar. For this, I went for the sick outplay potential of using Special Poperations and Comanche Commander, making sure I use my abilities to get that sick 0 hearts and $0, and sometimes moving a Glue Monkey 2 steps to the left. That ended up, rather surprisingly enough, not being very ideal, and I lost. I got close, but still ended up falling short. Then I tried again with a slightly more viable comp of Carrier Flagship and Sky Shredder. Late game was actually kind of hard, and since this is challenge editor I got stuck on a certain round in particular, in which I decided, Glue Monkey? No, sounds boring, that won't help us. Ninja Sabo, what the fuck do you think I am? Cringe? Get that out of here. I'm going to spam tab and make sure my plane goes 50 billion fucking directions simultaneously to optimize my DPS by an additional 1.8%. Somehow that worked. Round 100 was a bit scary, but that was still fairly easy with my abilities, and we can move on to Adora's Temple. For this I went with Edian yet again because of course I did, and apparently my pronunciation of this name is wrong. Why am I only bringing this up way later in the video even though I said his name over and over again? Don't fucking ask me questions that make sense. My reasoning? French people are dumb, so I'll refer to Edian as E from here on out. Oh, but Davey, his name is just French for Steven, hardy har har. That's cool and all, but why couldn't I just fucking call him Steven? Fun fact for you, French is literally to date the only word I've ever censored on my entire channel, which says a lot because I say a lot of fuck words. Anyways, back on topic, the early game was actually relatively easy. This is a map in which E can kill all the early camo rounds before getting his UAV, which is very nice. and allowed me to save up for my flagship carrier. And despite everything, the flagship carrier is still the flagship carrier. And that easily carried me straight to my Sky Shredder, which killed basically everything. And by the end I had a grand total of $40,000 saved up because fuck it, who even needs money when you have Burr? After this it was time for Spring Springs, which is, fun fact, chronologically the last map I recorded because I'm a big fucky dumbo head and there's like a billion maps in this folder and it's so many goddamn gigabytes and I forgot one, okay? This is like 4 Witcher 3s. Anyways, that aside however, I started the map with E, and actually, we're not even going to go in depth with this one because it's the same fucking strategy again. While Carrier Flagship and Sky Shredder are already kind of a meta strategy. Granted, there's a few things that make them better that we don't have access to, namely an Alchemist or an Overclock, but that's about it, really. It requires essentially no micro, the strat is very straightforward with key timings, and at the end you can have enough money saved up to where you can pretty much buy whatever support you want or need, so fuck it. Karts N Darts. Goddamn, where's the second paragraph of the book? Moon landing. For this I went for a start with dart monkeys. Just dart monkeys. Got my E, and then the middle path mortar. On the harder maps you're going to be seeing this guy a lot, because I think, with appropriate micro of course, this is one of the most cost-effective towers in the entire game. And for this map in particular I actually ended up building 2. And with the Ultra Juggernaut I was building, I turned this crater into, well, an even bigger crater. With bouncing balls of death killing everything inside painfully, and mortars making sure that all life would be purged from the galaxy. Although I do have to ask, how the fuck are monkeys surviving in space? Like, yeah, I know the whole moon landing conspiracy thing, but there's asteroids and shit flying everywhere. And as far as I remember, this isn't even the first map that takes place in space. Also, how the fuck are the spiders here too? I know they're Halloween decorations, but judging from my guilty verdict I got from hanging mutilated corpses in my front lawn, that doesn't provide a good case in the court of law. I digress. With this crater right here getting pounded so hard that even hardcore gay pornography stars would consider it a bit excessive, I finally got my permaspike and God to clear out any possible stragglers, and it was a pretty easy victory. Then we can move on to Haunted. For this we started with E, yet again, just to get more use out of MOB glue against DDTs and occasionally an important UCAV, or UCAV. For the first few towers we went with monkey subs, and I was debating on either doing this or going flagship carrier, but eventually, for the sake of both you and me, I decided to go with subs. Upgrading them to a 031 ballistic missile did extremely well for us, and alongside an MOAB shove, they carried the game long enough for me to get attack zone. I was debating with myself on late game strategies for this map, because we don't exactly have the Prince of Darkness here, and eventually I decided on primary expertise for MOAB Mauler spam, and that, rather unsurprisingly, did extremely well for us. And by the time we got everything set up to spam our maulers, there was very little the game could throw at us to get past our defenses. Afterwards, we can move on to Downstream, which is one of the easier intermediate maps. Going for a 101 sub was more than enough to allow me to get my big E, and then it was heli time. Although I do have to say I never mentioned this fucking sniper, but a 100 or a 110 sniper covers my bases extremely well in the early game. Anyways, with the map's longer length, it was only natural that we went for a heli pilot. And imagine going any other path other than the bottom one. Of course that did extremely well, and really outside of the occasional ability used from E, I was able to save all the way up to my Comanche commander. And for late game I went for attack zone with primary mentoring. And for the very last few rounds, primarily the one with DDTs, I went for a super maelstrom and call to arms to finish up the map and move on to firing range. In case you're starting to notice the theme, we went for E yet again. I guess to explain myself, out of all the heroes I believe that E, Pat Fusty, and Sada were overall the best. We aren't really covering any maps here that require a Quincy start, and Churchill is situational at best. Sada is pretty self-explanatory on why she's good, but I'd like to say that I think overall Pat Fusty is the best hero at our disposal. He synergizes well with a lot of our strongest picks, he's pretty cheap all things considered, and his late game potential is insane. but personally I found myself overall preferring E because he's much simpler to use, the UAV makes the early to mid game a lot easier of a transition, he synergizes well with quite a few of our support towers, and I find that the raw burst potential of the UCAV is a lot more reliable. I'd like to imagine that if I ever covered the expert maps, Pat Fusty would be used on almost all of them. Well, any that don't require Quincy, of course. I mean, hell, on all these maps I primarily used him, and I'd like to point out that Mesa was 1 with him, so he's insanely good, just a bit harder to utilize is all. Anyways, rant aside, this map I went for a middle path mortar, which was more than enough to get me all the way to round 61. And then I went ahead and bought a pop and awe because even with decent micro, balloons were starting to get pretty far. And this was powerful enough that I didn't need to micro at all. Just utilize this position here to maximize all the damage, and I just got to relax. Blimp damage was still a tad bit lacking though, so I went ahead and got a full auto sniper with the top path upgrades. And for the 90s, well, I'm sure you can make an accurate guess on what I did. By the end, I also got an MOAB Eliminator because fuck it, why not? We won, cracked. For this, I wanted one monkey in particular, the Dark Champion. Why? Because I knew this map was simple enough that I could easily get him with minimal towers. With middle path mortar micro, a single MOAB mauler, Bunjitsu, E, and obviously Dark Knight, I eventually got my Dark Champion at round 83, and then it was basically GG. It's a Dark Champion at round 83, and holy fuck him Dr. Seuss. That aside, however, the only other tower I had to buy for the rest of the game was a 040 sub, and by the end I decided just to upgrade it to a preemptive strike because fuck it, why not? Seems to be a popular reasoning for this video at least. I killed the bad, and then we can move on to Streambed. Actually, there's 2 Streambeds, because apparently I beat this map twice. Well, I'm a man of equal opportunity and I don't want to discriminate against strategies, so one of these used a primary expertise, tac zone and MOAB eliminator, and one of these utilized a permaspike and Comanche commander. Remember how I said 14 seconds ago I wasn't going to discriminate unfairly? Just like most politicians, I actually lied and only said that for my own gain. I'm sure most people could tell that I outright prefer one of these over the other, but the problem is if I say that, I'm going to have to go in depth and actually explain myself and make this section not incredibly short, and that sounds dumb and requires effort, so Chutes. Sada was easily the best hero for this. She stabs, balloons die, I get to save up, it's a win-win-win. Then of course I had to consider what I wanted to buy. And by that, I'm actually mean what I needed to buy in order to get my Comanche commander. It's really good on this map, but sadly we need a good stepping stone for that. And I was originally hoping that maybe with well-timed Sada abilities all we would need was never miss darts, but sadly we're getting overran fairly early, so I went ahead and got a Spectre. And then I was barely able to save up enough for my Comanche commander, and even after that though it wasn't necessarily smooth sailing. I still had to buy a bunch of support, Ninja Sabos, First Strikes, and Glue Monkeys galore, and even then I still had to utilize Sada's abilities well, pretty much only using her abilities the second balloons got to the very end. After a bunch of very close calls we were able to get everything prepared for rounds 99 and 100, and fortunately the last 2 rounds were simple enough. Although the bad did come hilariously close to killing me, but we managed to beat it and move on to Rake. Oh wait, actually no, that map doesn't exist. Not only is it in German, but it's this fucking strategy again. Disregard my earlier comment about how badass Himmel Shredder is. It's not the Comanche Commander or the Prince of Darkness, so I don't really care. Yeah, see, this is more like it. Look at those helicopters, look at its grace. Am I skipping over the last intermediate map for no other reason than I can finally move on to the advanced maps? No. This was actually a map that I was dreading quite heavily. Even without this challenge, Geared Chimps is genuinely fucking brutal, and it took me quite a while to find out how to beat it. Obviously, with a map like this, E was our best bet because Speen, but for the start we went for a fuck ton of Sniper Monkeys which got me far enough to get my middle path mortar and MOAB shove. And as much as I'd love to say, then I got the Comanche Commander, my grandfather came back to life, world hunger ended, and I got married to Big Titty Goth GF and we all lived happily ever after, As I've said, this map is pretty brutal and I'm about as romantically available as a 78-year-old hermit living in the mountains. So I had to buy 2 Nevamis darts and micro my middle path mortar harder than a StarCraft II Korean Terran player to barely get enough money to buy my Comanche Commander at round 76. And to quote my script verbatim, that definitely easied the 70s through 90s, but in the late game I had to buy a Pompandal and continue microing my heart out just to be able to beat round 98 and 99. Then I bought a Spike Storm for round 1. Wait a minute. Let me pull up... fuck. I just wasted 6 hours of my life. Guess what I have to do in order to get rid of one purchase? The entire map. All over again. Yay! Fortunately, you don't have to experience this with me though, so Peninsula. For this, I busted out MidPathBoomer because of the previously mentioned reasons, and I really needed any extra damage potential I could possibly get my hands on. The start was a bit convoluted, but after trying a whole bunch of varying starts, I found out that a sub here, a dart monkey or 2 here, MidPathBoomer here, and a sniper here is the best start. This has enough popping power to get you through the early game while simultaneously not getting rid of the 2 most important positions in the late game. The main strategy of this map was going to be a Pat Maelstrom, Comanche Commander, and Permaspike for the late game. Sadly, there's a bunch of elements here that kinda make this map extremely inconvenient, such as not being able to place an MIB to cover all of your defenses, not being able to put them in a position where MidPathBoomer can cover them all, and you get the point. It's a water map. Anyways, for this we went for Pat Maelstrom first since that deals with the early threats the best, then Comanche Commander, and finally a Permaspike and 2 MIBs. And luckily, by the end, I had enough money to buy a first strike at the last round and beat this map after many and many hours of trying. And I really do mean that. Outside of Mesa, this was by far the most time I spent on a single map, and no joke, the time I spent trying to beat these 2 alone, I could have uploaded like 2 or 3 entire videos, and I'm not joking. There's a reason this video is late, even excluding these 3 maps. Anyways, for the last map of this video, High Finance. For this, I went for my classic E-Antics again, and of course, since technically this map has only one lane that Bloons can go through, middle path mortar was going to be incredible here. Is micro required? Well, yeah, but so efficient that I can excuse the inevitable hand damage I'm going to have by age 24. I mean, look at all my favorite games growing up throughout the years. It's like my brain chose every game based on their fucking efficiency of giving me arthritis. Anyways, unfortunately, our late game strat, sadly enough, wasn't Comanche Commander. I know it's sacrilege, but I found that Permaspike was a lot more consistent, and after I got the Permaspike, I was able to save up for a preemptive strike, which ensures a guaranteed win at round 100 and deals with 95, 97, and 99 incredibly well, meaning only 2 of the last rounds are any threat. And although round 98 was a complete bitch to deal with, requiring me to micro my heart out and use my abilities fairly well, it was eventually triumphed and then the last rounds were dealt with ease. And for the time being, I can say with a relative amount of confidence that you can beat BTD6 without war criminals. And again, even though these 2 maps aren't in this video, I'd still love to update the description with the first person who beats it. So if you manage to beat it, feel free to DM me on Discord with proof and I'll credit your accomplishment. And if you have a channel, I don't mind linking that either. Just don't, like, give me an OnlyFans channel, okay? Anyways, as always, thank you to my patrons who support me through thick and thin. No matter how much I mock you in the end credits just because, haha, funny, your support genuinely means a lot. My upload schedule as of recent hasn't been too consistent, to say the least, so thank you for sticking with me. Also remember how I said at the beginning of the video we're going to have a sponsored segment? Well, here we go. Remember in the very first video that sparked this complete disaster of a series I was like, haha, Benjamin, cybersecurity, NordVPN. Well, we did it. Here it is. So you might be thinking to yourself, Davey, why do I need a VPN? Well, firstly, excusing the fact that a VPN isn't a human need, or a requirement for civilization or survival, as cool as they may be, I'm going to assume that if you made it this far into the video, you play video games at least in some capacity. Problem: video games aren't a human right, and they're not available for purchase or even to play everywhere in the world. If you've ever thought to yourself, man, I sure wish I could play Carmageddon, Carmageddon 2 Carpocalypse Now, and Carmageddon Max Damage, but I live in Germany, and they really don't like video games for some reason. Firstly, why? But secondly, now you can. Of course, even if you live in a country that fortunately doesn't have as much restrictions, you can still find discounts in other regions. And if you're somebody like me who has a Steam library full of 6 games you play religiously, and 100 games that you keep telling yourself you'll play someday but you never do, now you can make that 200 games and question your life choices more than usual. Oh yeah, also privacy. Look, Facebook has been recommending me this one image of Vladimir Putin on a horse for like 9 months now, and I'm not even kidding. I don't know how or why, but they're on shirts, they're on posters, they're on pillows, and I'd like to imagine if the search histories on these abominations were public, my advertising would be more like, "Hey Davey, have you ever considered buying a thermonuclear bomb?" And although the answer is yes, legally I should probably say no. So if me saying all these things in my usual monotone voice has you jumping up and down at excessive speeds in excitement, check the link in the description and the pinned comment for a huge discount. Or alternatively, use code Gunface. Yeah, we got a discount code now, we're fancy and all that. I'd threaten you, but I'm pretty sure NordVPN wouldn't exactly be happy with that, so instead, feel mildly pressured into doing so. Okay? Okay. Take care of yourself now.